This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to the program. It's always good to be with you. It's a little cold outside, but we are going to heat things up inside. I'm joined by 2nd District Congressman French Hill, the Little Rock Republican who is finishing his first term in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Roby. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations. You made it 2 whole years.
2 whole years. I've learned a lot.
And you're going back.
Going back. I didn't get enough.
Let's talk about how you have been spending some of your time over the last 2 years. I know you and I have talked on a couple of occasions about your visits to the border, to the Mexican border here, your concerns about border security and illegal immigration. What's it going to take to correct that situation, and is Congress ready to do it?
It's a great question because in 2005, President Bush asked Congress to authorize enhanced border security, and you've seen some of it. I went to San Diego to see the double fencing, where they went from about 500,000 people crossing the border illegally down to interdicting about 27,000 over a course of a year period. So the double fencing in San Diego, for example, is the example of something that works. And I think what the border has to have is an assessment across the whole length and pick the right kind of security measures that fit the terrain and the topography. I think Congress knows that that's what has to happen. That's what Congress wants. I think that's what the incoming Trump administration would like to do. They need to see what the price tag of that is and see how to pay for it.
It's going to be a little high, isn't it? Particularly if you were to build a wall across all of that terrain.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've never, the border security, the border is porous. We have guns and money going south, and we have drugs and illegal immigrants coming north, and so it's got to be plugged, but it's not an inexpensive proposition, and it has to be done in a way that's fits the topography, the terrain, and the need.
We'll take him literally or figuratively, maybe not literally on all things. So,
I
think you have to.
I always have. I call it a security wall,
right.
True. And in some places, it is the double fencing, road between it, like you see in El Paso and in San Diego. But we get into these desert, mountainous areas, it may take a different technique. Yeah. And there are other ways to do it.
Yeah, all right, we'll look for some action on that. You've also focused a lot of your attention on the VA situation, not only in terms of some government inefficiency here in Arkansas with the solar panels and across the country, but also on VA care. Do you feel like a problem is, do you feel like there's a solution in place for that problem now?
We've got over 300,000 VA employees across the system. That's up about 140,000 just in a decade. So while we have good people, including veterans that work at the VA and great doctors, including wonderful mental health professionals here at Fort Roots, clearly we've got a system that's not working. We've got care problems like in Phoenix where people actually died. We have unethical behavior about waiting lists. So I hope the Trump administration will take all the lessons that we've learned in the last few years seriously and try to make management changes. But you've got to have good people in the leadership jobs, and you've got to push that culture down. And when you have 300,000 people, that's a tough job. But our veterans deserve the best care we can deliver.
I'm not surprised we're talking about government efficiency with you. You have a Golden Fleece Award that you crank out once a month. You're also a former businessman, so I know from past dealings with you how much you like to control costs and expenses on that. Yep. Your latest Golden Fleece Award winner is the Pentagon. There was a study that came out, showed that there could have been about $125 billion in savings over a 5-year period. The Pentagon kind of pushed that down. Republicans want to spend more money on the military, French. This is a big campaign issue across the board.
It is.
But you've got this government waste. $125 billion is not chump change, not even at the federal government level. Right. How are you going to spend more money on the military and not spend more money on the military when they shouldn't be rewarded for that behavior, quite frankly?
It shouldn't be. You've got almost 1 million civilian contractor employees at the Pentagon. This story that Bob Woodward of Washington Post fame uncovered, $125 billion of misspent money in the civilian sector in the Pentagon, and that they actually covered it up so that Congress wouldn't lower their budget. And we're talking about a budget of about $620 billion for our entire defense effort. So it's a big number. The incoming administration needs to do reform. Rumsfeld talked about it, and then he was confronted with Iraq and Afghanistan and 9/11. And Don Rumsfeld said one of the biggest problems we have in the Pentagon is we have a World War II culture staffing levels with a 21st century need, and that's the kind of reform. And I think it starts with looking at the civilian contracts and the million civilian employees.
So yes or no, does the military get more money?
I think the military's budget is, in my view, if it's funded at the level it is, it's adequate, but I think you've got an example here from my Golden Fleece that there's need for serious reform, both in the procurement, like the F-35 story that the President-elect discussed the other day, and when you have that much contract, I think there are too many employees there.
All right, got to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and talk about some other issues. We've got Congressman French Hill with us. I'm Roby Brock. We're back after this. And we are back talking politics with Congressman French Hill. Let's turn our attention to the Trump administration, what we can expect in the first 100 days, tax reform, regulatory relief. There's apparently going to be an effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I don't know if we're going to replace it or if we're going to delay it. Won't repealing it without a solution kind of roil the health insurance markets there? They don't like uncertainty. Business doesn't.
There's certainly, under no circumstances should you go through the repeal process without a transition period that maintains service and a transitional appropriate service level to the people who have either exchange policies or under the expanded Medicaid type policies. So Tom Price, Dr. Tom Price, orthopedic surgeon from Georgia, who's going to be the incoming head of the Department of Human Services at the federal level, has to design that and work with Congress on how to repeal and replace Obamacare.
What do you think will happen? What do you think will be the structure of it?
Well, I do think that budget reconciliation, which is a process by which the House and Senate can do certain spending measures without a filibuster risk in the Senate, will be used to do some of the unplugging of the fiscal plumbing of Obamacare, and then the replacement and enhancement part will have to come to the House and Senate through regular order and be approved, obviously subject to filibuster perhaps in the Senate.
Are there any ideas floating around out there? Or you think this is let's wait until the new administration's in place before we start seeing something?
Tom Price, I urge people to go to better.gop and they can read Tom Price's ideas as the House Budget Committee chairman for how to replace Obamacare.
What will be the immediate tax reform that you think will get enacted?
Well, there's really strong bipartisan support for lowering the C-Corp rate, the rate corporations play, collapsing the rates for families, making family compliance easier, actually letting you file your 1040 on a postcard, and removing. Is that what
you think it'll go to?
Well, that's what they want for the individual income tax.
You support that?
I do support that. I think one of the biggest complaints about our income tax system is how complicated it is to fill out and comply when you are in your spring pay-up mode. But the other thing is to remove the territoriality of American taxes, and that'll also make American business more competitive.
While we're kind of on the subject of businesses, a lot of scrutiny about Donald Trump's businesses versus Donald Trump's politics.
Yep.
How do you think he ought to handle that situation to satisfy you? I know you're a strong ethics and government guy. There's obviously, it's ripe for conflict of interest if he doesn't do something different. What do you expect to see?
I think Donald Trump needs to look at what past presidents have done and put a bright line between his personal affairs, both business and personal, and his service as our president, and make sure that that's something that people can assess, analyze, and find transparent.
Know that he's making decisions that are in America's best interest.
That's right, yeah.
I think it's going to be a tough tightrope for him. We've got about 30 seconds left. Lots of scrutiny on what's been happening with Russia tampering with our elections. A lot of news this last week. What do you think? What do you want to see happen as a result of all this?
I'd like two things. One, I'd like for there to be in the executive branch and the legislative branch a common view of what did Russia do or not do vis-a-vis tampering with the email flow at the Democratic National Committee, Republican National Committee. Did they attempt to, quote, influence the election, and in what way? And make sure that everyone in the executive branch and the legislative branch are on the same page. That's point one. Point two is, what is the federal policy for a counter cyber attack for another that can be made public? In other words, we have a classified view and an unclassified view. And I'd like to make sure that the incoming administration and the intelligence committees on the Hill have that plan. What is our official U.S. government policy on that.
Got to cut it short there. Congressman
Rob.
French Hill, thank you as always. Appreciate you.
holidays.
Happy
Merry
holidays
Christmas
to you too.